5, our minibus was halted in Tiahuanaco. The highways throughout Bolivia were blocked by Campesinos. The revolt swelled in La Paz from 80,000 people to 500,000 by early June. This revolt led to the resignation of President Carlos Mesa on June 6th. The explosions heard were tear gas from the police and dynamite from the miners. Cochabamba had numerous protests, even while they celebrated the Heroines De La Cornida festival. Thanks to a short truce, I traveled out to Cochabamba and Sapina to see the library dedicated to my niece.
Across the riverbed.
Despite numerous blockades, I returned to La Paz and caught a plane back to Peru, just before the airport too was shut down. Those were the highlights of my travels to Bolivia.
It's about sunset. That way is Puno. It's to the west. And this is the way to Bolivia.
I started my Bolivia adventure by taking a minivan from Puno, Peru, along the shores of Lake Titicaca to the border town of Desaguadero.
Okay, this is the border town. Peru, Desaguadero. Leaving Peru, going into Bolivia. This is where I got off the little bus. It's quite crowded.
I went through the immigration, caught another minivan to La Paz with a stop at the archaeological ruins of Tiahuanaco. As we approached Tiahuanaco, we began to see that the peasants, or campesinos, had put up rock barricades along the roadway toward La Paz. At the entrance to the archaeological site, our van, along with all other vehicles, were stopped by a large group of protesters. They were protesting for the nationalization of Bolivia's gas reserves, controlled by 6 multinational companies, including British Petroleum.
City Hall. And there's almost nobody here today. I think I'm gonna go eat, and then I'll go do a tour. Okay, here's the church. And this is the hotel I stayed at. And here are the surroundings. This is where the archaeological site is, so we're right across from the Temple of the Moon. It's right there. Can't quite see it through the barbed wire, but there it is. And that's the pre-Colombian site. Over 50,000 people lived here. And there's the road to La Paz.
Tiahuanaco is one of the most important civilizations that developed during the pre-Columbian period. It prevailed for nearly 3,000 years and is credited with many important scientific discoveries and artistic achievements. The sloped hill with the wall sections and archaeological workers is called Akapana Pyramid, with 7 steeped terraces. Some believed it was used for water storage, but much of it was removed for construction of nearby homes and churches. The Saya temple contains monuments that indicate the change of the season and solar year. It was one of the largest pre-Columbian cities of the Americas, characterized by splendid buildings designed by architects and planners. These ruins are all that are left of this Tiahuanacan civilization. This semi-subterranean temple remains one of the most decorated constructions. The pillars inside are adorned with 175 limestone sculptures. The Puerta de la Luna, along with the Puerto del Sol, provides us with symbols of both their artistic achievements and their knowledge of astronomy. Their agricultural feats were invented to confront the difficult climate. It is most remarkable with the use of surface and subterranean aqueducts for water storage, sewage, and farming platforms, which created harvests over 20 times the amount yielded by conventional agricultural methods. The Tiahuanaco believed that elongating the skulls created greater intelligence.
But you can see the ground is frozen. My room, it was 54 degrees last night. I had 3 blankets on. It's 7:30 in the morning. I'm going to start my hike to La Paz. Hopefully I'll get a ride. It's about 53 miles, 87 kilometers. A couple lorries in town. Maybe I'll get a ride with them. There's a lady sitting in the sun. And I'm going to head out now. And there's the tienda I bought the beer from last night. And there's the way out of town. Everybody seems to be riding bicycles. I've seen no cars for the last day and a half.
On the second day of the protests, there were no vehicles on the streets of Tiahuanaco, so I began walking to La Paz, which is about 44 miles away. Luckily, a microbus suddenly appeared, and those of us who were walking were able to get a ride. We were only able to go about 20 miles, passing a number of smaller barricades before we were stopped by a group of Campesinos. Many of the passengers had bicycles attached to the roof of the minivan, so they were able to continue their journey that way.
Okay, I'm outside La Paz. Here's some more blockade. The bus I was taking dumped me off in the middle, or on the outskirts of La Paz because of these blockades. Wouldn't go any further. Okay, here's the guys. They're putting up a bigger barricades.
One of the leaders said that the blockade would last for 2 days.
¿Cuántos días?
¿Eh?
¿Cuántos días?
2 días. 2 días.
2 días.
Ah, 2. Uno definido.
Sí, definido.
As I continued my walk past each barricade, I sensed a festive air about the protests where the Campesinos had gathered.
Okay, that's my transport.
After walking about 3 hours and another 9 miles toward La Paz, a fellow with a cart attached to his bicycle offered to give me a ride. What a relief, and he didn't even ask for any money for the ride. We continued past numerous barricades on our way into La Paz, and it seemed like the protesters got a big kick out of seeing this gringo riding in his cart.
Belga! Buenos días. Buenos días.
¿Dónde hay movilidad?
Ah, voy a La Paz. Oh, 20 minutos.
Claro.
That was quite a barricade there. Okay, as we're coming into town, we've got more and more of these barricades. Got to get off the bicycle. Okay, here's the beginning of La Paz. They've blocked the streets, so nobody's going in or out, so I had to get off my tricycle. And now I'm going to walk into the downtown area. They're going to have a demonstration here. Sounds like they got a band, but no cars are coming in or out of town from here. Okay, here's where the blockade starts. Got signs here.
Today, more than 10,000 Aymara peasant farmers from the 20 highland provinces came down from El Alto to protest in the streets of La Paz.
And they got the police lined up. And there's the toll gate. And there's my ride down into La Paz. Okay, here's La Paz. From up by the strike site.
Over the next several days, these protests would grow in size and intensity, culminating in over 500,000 protesters by June 6th, the day President Carlos Mesa resigned. He was replaced by an interim president, Eduardo Rodriguez, who was the Supreme Court Chief Justice, who implemented the hydrocarbon law, which returned ownership to the state, all of the hydrocarbons and natural resources, and increased taxes from 16% to 32%. Also, within 6 months, all contracts with foreign firms had to be renegotiated. The rainbow square flags are the Aymara Lupala, which is very prominent in marches of indigenous and peasant movements in Bolivia.
Pelotudos defienden a un gobierno que está vendiendo el futuro de tus hijos.
not tear gas grenades, they're lunch.
The Presidential Palace and the Legislative Palace are located around Murillo Plaza, along with the cathedral. It seems like the pigeons have all gathered here because of the relative quiet compared to all other areas of the city. They're filled with protesters. You can hear occasional sounds of tear gas canisters going off, as well as the miners' dynamite, as the protesters gather in Plaza San Francisco and then march around the streets surrounding Murillo Plaza, the epicenter of Bolivia's political life.
Apparently they're protecting it from the demonstrators, so I gotta walk through both sides. There's the tear gas going off, so I'm heading to my hotel. Okay, this is on my way to the hotel. I'm about 2 blocks away, and there's another police car. Okay, there's some group. Well, this is right in front of my hotel. The protesters are marching up the side street, and the police are just moving them off.
Some of the minivan windows were clubbed by the demonstrators. Miners continued to set off small charges of dynamite. The second day of protests included marches by various groups that included the indigenous Amayara Campesinos, miners, students, and others. The bulk of the demonstrators are the Campesinos who have traveled from all of the outlying departments.
Okay, this is the second day. Buses haven't gone anywhere. The station's closed. And the other buses are just all parked here. They've got trapped in the plaza.
Although the bus terminal remains closed, the bus sellers walk up and down the roads surrounding the terminal, selling tickets for all destinations in Bolivia. It is Thursday, and the demonstrators have called a truce, so that vehicles including buses and minivans can once again travel. So I get one to Cochabamba.
The toll gate that was blocked when I came through last time, we got a truce today. Lots of people leaving in Micros, the city, now that the blockade's off for the day. So it's really crowded.
Lots of minivans are crowded along the way out of town at El Alto, for some passengers on their way home and others to further protest in Sucre. I am on my way to Cochabamba and then on to Saipina to visit the library there that was dedicated to my niece, Krista Hunt Ausland. On the road to Cochabamba, it is still littered with the remains of the barricades, which will again be put up when the protests resume.
100 kilometers outside of La Paz, we're in the Alto Plano, and you can see a mining thing way up in the hills there. Gone through a few barricades, not too bad. 14,700 feet.
As we approach Cochabamba Valley, I'm reminded of the successful protests back there in 2000 over huge water rate increases and the privatization recommendations of the International Monetary Fund and World Bank that led to the expulsion of the U.S. multinational Bechtel. Sure enough, my arrival was greeted by more protests as I sought to visit the tourist attractions in Cochabamba. Plaza 14 de Septiembre is the center of Cochabamba. This plaza commemorates the exaltation of the Cross festival, which is held throughout Bolivia.
It is Plaza Colón. Having a party here.
Today, May 27th, is Bolivia's Mother Day celebration in memory of the Heroines De La Cornida. In 1812, while the men were off fighting the Spanish were advancing on Cochabamba. Refusing calls to surrender, the women, led by a blind shopkeeper, fortified the hill where they fought heroically until finally hundreds of women were slaughtered and the Spanish troops retook Cochabamba. In future battles with the Spanish, the Argentinian general Belgrano would shout these words to restore courage and spark anger among his troops. "Are the women of Cochabamba present?" he would say.
La presencia también de la Virgen La Merced de hoy, y un acto importante.
The monument at the top of the hill portrays a statue of Christ surrounded by images of women fighting or sheltering their children.
Vamos a evitar.
Market in Cochabamba, Saturday morning. Odds and ends store.
Cochabamba is Bolivia's largest market town, containing several separate markets with entire sections devoted to a single type of products, ranging from potatoes to hats.
Sombreros down this alley. Tubers. Piles of potatoes, all different types. I think they've got over 1,000 different varieties of potatoes here. So. Lots of tomatoes.
The Cristo de la Concordia on top of Cerro de San Pedro is a few inches higher than the famous one overlooking Rio de Janeiro. It is over 33 meters high, with each meter representing a year of Christ's life, so the extra centimeters represent the additional months of his life. Here is the view of Cochabamba from up inside the Cristo de la Concordia.
Okay, this is the September 15th Plaza, Cochabamba.
Esta tarde se juega la lotería. Esta tarde juega lotería.
The workers are loading cocoa leaves and other packages on top of our bus to Saipina.
I'm on the road to Saipina. There's been one car in the last half hour, so things are not looking good. It's 30 kilometers, about 18 miles, so at this rate I should get there by noon, unless I get a ride. Okay, this is the road to Saipina. Beautiful mountains, early morning, a dusty road.
Shortly after sunrise, I finally got a ride from a taxi for the remaining 12 miles. While in Bolivia, I wanted to visit the library in Saipina that was dedicated to my niece, Krista Hunt Ausland. Since it was Sunday, most of the shops were closed in Saipina, including the library. They dedicated this library in her honor because of the significant work she did in a nearby village, Hernando de la Cruz, along with her husband, Aaron. But in May 1998, she died in a bus that plunged over a cliff. In her short time there, the villagers, especially the women, valued the work she had done with the Women's Cooperative and Agricultural Cooperative.
Lots of books.
For the area, this library has been a gathering place to read, visit, learn, and play, as these children are now doing.
And they're kind of curious. ¿Cómo se llama? ¿Cómo se llama?
Me llamo Rodrigo Vargas Sánchez, estudio en la escuela de arriba, en la escuela Fe y Alegría.
Okay.
Yo estudio en la escuela Humberto y me llamo Douglas David Azurdo y Mojica. Yo estudio allá en el Humberto de Villarruel y me llamo Alan Dixon Azurdo y Mojica.
Gracias. ¿Y?
Ya no sabe.
Ya.
Tu nombre decís.
¿Cuántos años?
Tení 5.
5. Okay.
Decí
Hey.
tu nombre, sí.
Hey, nombre. ¿Qué es su nombre?
Giancarla.
La Carla. ¿Carla es todo? Okay. Saipina Valley. Okay. It's 30 miles back to Saipina from the highway. It's all dirt road. Okay, this is the Camparapa market on a Sunday. Potatoes and vegetables. Okay, over the market. And it's in here. Okay, Camarapa, here's the town square. Real close here. Okay, that's towards Saipina. This is Camparapa, where I got off. And that's the way to Cochabamba. And this is the top of the hill.
I got a bus from Cochabamba back to La Paz, despite the rumors that there was going to be another total blockade. As we went through this narrow pass, some of the Campesino protesters began dropping rocks down on the roadway, which made for some very dangerous driving. As we approached the first villages past Cochabamba, it was apparent that the blockade had resumed. Our bus and all other vehicles ended up running these blockades that were set up on the outskirts of every village.
We're going around the city because of the blockade, so we're on some old back dirt road. across the riverbed.
We ended up going down the dirt roads that went around the villages.
Ese es Cosmo, ¿no?
The town we're getting around the blockade, going through the back way up in the field.
No es harto.
Vamos nomás. Ustedes ya pueden joderlo.
No pueden.
De que es normal. Están transitando estos males.
Okay, we're back on the road again.
Vamos, vamos.
We're heading back to the road again. Half the people want to go to the bathroom, half the people want to keep going. And there's the freeway again, or highway again. To the back way around another blockade. Okay, we have to go off the road again, another blockade.
Sometimes the buses would stop and have a local guide us around the village for a few paces. Other times,
Here's how we're going again.
board the bus and extract about 50 centavos from each passenger. Our bus is now stuck in some sand, so the passengers help get it unstuck by placing rocks and weeds under the tires and pushing the bus.
Bravo. They levied a 50 centavo fee on us there. They're blockaded, and so they're waiting for all the taxis. 2 more buses coming up to that blockade, so we'll see how it goes. All the buses are kind of lined up. We got a blockade going, and the bus drivers are trying to figure out which way to go and whether they can go today. And the blockade is up this way. Yeah, in that little town. Okay, that bus just turned around like we did. So, instead of going through the blockade, we're going around the blockade. So here we go again after half an hour waiting. Now our bus is stuck on the railroad tracks.
We unloaded the bus and then jacked it up and placed rocks underneath to free us from the railroad tracks. Good thing a train didn't come along.
Vamos. Poquitos son. Pero con piedra pueden arrojar. Bueno, desde aquí nomás son.
Okay, there's the blockade. 2 rocks.
This went on for the entire 360 kilometers on the way to La Paz. Our scheduled 7-hour bus ride turned into a 22-hour ride, stopping short in El Alto because it was too dangerous for the bus to continue, and the road was clogged with protesters.
Hasta aquí habían puesto tanta piedra. Ellos no han hecho eso. ¿Qué haber? 4 locos que están ahí. Sí. ¿Cuántas gatos son? ¿No ves? Sí. Eso, ya quiero.
Where the bus ended up in El Alto. I don't know how far we are. Probably 45 minutes or so. Again, total blockade going into La Paz. Bus let us off about 5 minutes ago. So here we go, down to the brow. This is on the way from Cochabamba. Okay, and there are fewer police here today, so everything's kind of even up.
I walked the last 5 miles into town and stayed overnight at the same La Paz hotel. Tear gas and the sounds of demonstrators saturated the area. While there, I learned tomorrow's demonstration was going to be larger, more disruptive, and volatile than the previous few days' demonstrations. On the 31st, the demonstrators will have over 50,000 people in La Paz to demonstrate, and they were also planning to shut down the airport. I decided that this was not a time to be a tourist in Bolivia, since the blockades prevented any travel and there was danger in the air. Early morning, I rode a minivan up to the El Alto toll booth area and then walked to the airport with plans to get on any plane back to Peru. I finally got one of the last ones out to Cusco. On June 1st, the National Police decided by consensus not to repress the protests and were internally reprimanded by the government. This probably lessened the casualties. By June 6, President Carlos Mesa resigned while over 500,000 demonstrators mobilized the streets of La Paz. The interim president flowed to the third manic session since the first two refused. Edward Rodriguez, Supreme Court Justice, became the interim president. He was considered apolitical and trustworthy to handle the transition until the December elections. In December, Evo Morales was elected the 80th president and the first indigenous president of Bolivia, who has implemented socialist policies in the country by introducing land reforms, nationalizing various industries, primarily the gas and oil industries, and opposing the U.S., International Monetary Fund, World Bank, and corporate involvement in the country's politics and economy. His administration marks an end to colonialism and a new beginning.